Most people believe that being smart means winning arguments. They think if they can prove someone wrong with better facts, better logic, and better proof, then they have won. But in the real world, that belief is one of the quickest ways to lose your power. The moment you start arguing with someone who refuses to think, you step into a trap. It is a trap built on ego. It is a trap built on emotion. It is a trap where logic has no power at all. Think about it. Have you ever tried to reason with someone who just would not listen? You bring facts, and they bring louder opinions. You explain calmly, and they twist your words. You stay rational, and they get emotional. Suddenly, the conversation is no longer about truth. It becomes about pride. It becomes about winning. It becomes about who can take over the room. This is where many smart people make a big mistake. They assume the other person is playing the same game, the game of logic. But foolish people are not trying to understand you. They are trying to protect their ego. And the more you argue with them, the more control you give them over your attention, your time, and your feelings. This is exactly the kind of situation Niccolo Machiavelli warned about. Machiavelli understood something that most people learn far too late. Power is not about proving that you are right. Power is about deciding where your energy goes. The smart mind does not waste its strength fighting battles that cannot be won. Instead, it steps back, observes, thinks, and quietly moves the situation in its favor. You see, foolish people want to fight. They want reactions. They want your attention. But the moment you stop giving them that attention, the dynamic changes. Suddenly, they are speaking, but no one powerful is listening, and that is the moment they lose their influence. In this video, you are going to learn 8 strategies that smart people use to deal with foolish individuals without arguing, without explaining endlessly, and without losing control of the situation. These strategies are not about making people feel small. They are about protecting your power, because the real sign of intelligence is not winning arguments. It is knowing which arguments are not worth entering at all. And once you understand these strategies, you will start seeing something fascinating. The smartest people in the room rarely argue the most. They simply control the room in quieter ways. Before we move forward, I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. Silence is power. Now let us begin with the first strategy smart people use when dealing with foolish individuals. The first discipline smart people develop is the ability to know when logic has no value in a conversation. This sounds simple, but it is surprisingly hard for many people. When you value reason, you naturally believe that facts should settle disagreements. You assume that if someone is wrong, all you have to do is show them better information. But that assumption only works when the other person is looking for truth. Many people are not. They are looking for approval. They are protecting their pride, their identity, or their public image. In those moments, facts become useless. Logic becomes background noise. Even clear proof will be rejected, because accepting it would mean admitting weakness. And for many individuals, protecting ego is more important than finding truth. This is why arguments with foolish people often feel so tiring. No matter how clear your explanation is, the conversation keeps circling back to the same emotional resistance. The goal of the discussion quietly changes. It is no longer about understanding reality. It becomes about avoiding shame. At that point, logic has already lost its power. Smart people notice this shift early. They pay attention to signs that reveal the true nature of the conversation. When someone keeps interrupting, ignores facts, blows things out of proportion, or twists words, these actions reveal something important. The person is not listening. They are performing. They are speaking to defend their position rather than examine it. The discussion has become a show instead of a search for truth. This is the moment strategic thinkers make a key decision. They step back, not because they lack arguments, not because they cannot win, but because they see that the battlefield is broken. Trying to reason with someone who refuses to reason is like trying to play chess with someone who keeps knocking the pieces off the board. You may know the game. You may understand the strategy, but the rules are no longer being followed. Continuing the game only drains your time and attention. Machiavelli understood this human tendency centuries ago. He saw that people often act based on emotion and self-interest, long before they act based on logic. Machiavelli once said, "Men in general judge more by their eyes than by their hands, for everyone can see, but few can truly understand." This insight reveals something deep. Many people do not analyze situations carefully. They react to appearances, feelings, and social pressure. So when a conversation becomes an emotional show instead of a logical exchange, the smart move is not to fight harder. It is to walk away. Strategic thinkers understand that silence and distance protect their most valuable resource, a clear mind. Instead of trying to drag someone toward reason, they simply step away from the argument completely. This saves their focus for situations that truly matter. Over time, this habit builds a strong reputation. People begin to notice something different about you. You do not rush into debates. You do not chase every disagreement. You do not react without thinking. You choose your battles carefully, and that control sends a quiet but powerful message. Control, because the person who decides when not to argue is often the person who truly understands the situation. One of the most overlooked forms of strength is the ability to protect your energy. Most people guard their money carefully. They guard their reputation. They guard their belongings, but they rarely guard the one thing that decides the quality of every choice they make: their mental and emotional energy. Every pointless argument drains that resource. Every heated debate uses up attention that could be used for something important. And the more time you spend defending yourself against foolish ideas, the less focus you have for building something valuable. This is why smart people treat their attention like a valuable tool. They understand that energy is limited. Once it is spent, it cannot be easily recovered. A single useless conflict can stay in your thoughts for hours. You replay the conversation in your head. You imagine better responses. You think about what you should have said. Meanwhile, the person who started the argument goes on with their day without a second thought. This is the hidden cost of arguing with foolish individuals. They pull you into emotional chaos while gaining nothing real. The whole interaction becomes a distraction from your true priorities. Strategic thinkers refuse to fall into this pattern. Instead of reacting right away, they stop and think about the situation. They ask themselves a quiet but powerful question: is this worth my energy? Most of the time, the answer is no. Not every opinion needs a response. Not every criticism needs attention. Not every accusation needs a defense. When you start to understand this idea, your behavior changes a lot. You stop feeling like you have to reply to every comment. You stop explaining yourself to people who are set on misunderstanding you. You stop joining debates that go nowhere. Your silence becomes a choice. Your focus becomes protected, and the effect is immediate. You feel calmer, clearer, and more in charge of your thoughts. Situations that once upset you suddenly feel unimportant. This is not weakness, it is discipline. Centuries ago, Niccolò Machiavelli observed that successful leaders were careful about where they directed their attention. They did not spread their energy across every conflict. They saved it for moments that truly shaped results. Machiavelli once said, "He who wishes to be obeyed must know how to command." True command requires clarity, and clarity cannot exist in a mind constantly pulled into small fights. When you refuse to waste your energy on foolish arguments, you send a quiet signal. You show that your attention is valuable and limited. People begin to notice that provoking you does not bring the reaction they expected, and without your reaction, their power disappears. The conversation ends before it even starts. Over time, this discipline strengthens your presence. You appear calm, in control, and focused. Others may still argue loudly, but you remain steady, watching instead of reacting. This calmness is not by accident. It is the result of protecting your energy with purpose. Because the truth is simple: the smartest people do not win every argument. They simply refuse to take part in arguments that lead nowhere. Before we move to the next idea, I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. My energy is valuable. Most people underestimate the power of silence. They believe influence comes from speaking more, explaining more, and defending more. When someone challenges them, their first thought is to respond right away. They rush to make their position clear, fix mistakes, and prove they are correct. But this urge often causes the opposite effect. The more you talk in a tense situation, the more chances you give the other person to twist your words, interrupt you, or pull the conversation deeper into confusion. Instead of solving the problem, constant explaining feeds the conflict. Smart people understand a different idea. Sometimes the strongest response is no response at all. Silence is not weakness. Silence is control. When you refuse to react right away, you change the whole flow of the interaction. The person expecting a reaction suddenly faces something unfamiliar, a calm, steady lack of emotional response. And this creates pressure. Most foolish individuals depend on reactions to keep their energy going. Their arguments get louder and more dramatic when someone pushes back. Conflict gives them energy, it gives them attention, but when they meet silence, that energy has nowhere to go. Instead of making the situation worse, silence forces them to keep talking without resistance. And something interesting happens when people talk without being stopped. They start revealing too much. They exaggerate. They go against themselves. They show emotional reasons that were hidden behind their words. What started as confidence slowly turns into discomfort. Without someone to fight against, the argument loses its shape. This is why silence can be such a strong psychological tool. It lets the other person show their own weaknesses while you stay calm and watchful. Strategic thinkers use this on purpose. They listen carefully instead of rushing to defend themselves. They let pauses happen in conversations. They give others the room to talk themselves into mistakes. While others react emotionally, they remain still. Machiavelli once said, "The first way to judge the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him." This idea applies to conversation as well. When you watch quietly, you start to see people clearly. Their character, their intentions, and their limits become visible over time. Silence makes your awareness sharper. Instead of focusing on what you want to say next, you focus on what the other person is actually showing you. And this knowledge becomes power. You start to notice patterns. You see who speaks from emotion and who speaks from reason. You learn which people are worth talking to and which ones feed on chaos. Most importantly, you learn patience. Silence teaches you to slow down the moment. You no longer feel pushed to react right away. You give yourself space to think before acting. This calmness shifts who is in control. While others rush to defend their pride, you stay steady, looking at the situation from a distance. And in many cases, the argument ends on its own. Because when one person refuses to fight, the conflict cannot continue. Drop this affirmation in the comments. Silence is strength. One of the most dangerous mistakes smart people make is agreeing to argue on someone else's terms. When a foolish person starts a debate, they usually pick the setting carefully. The setting may seem normal, a crowded discussion, a heated online thread, or a public confrontation, but underneath, these settings are made for confusion. They reward speed instead of thought. They reward volume instead of clarity. They reward emotion instead of logic. In these spaces, the person who shouts the loudest often seems to win, even if their ideas make little sense. The conversation becomes a show instead of a sharing of understanding. This is why foolish individuals feel at home in these situations. Chaos protects them. Disorder allows exaggeration, interruption, and twisting of facts to grow. Truth becomes optional. Clear thinking disappears. The loudest voice starts to take over attention. Strategic thinkers see this pattern right away. They understand that intelligence cannot grow in a setting built for noise. So instead of trying to argue better in these places, they make a different move entirely. They refuse to fight there. Walking away from the wrong battlefield is not giving up. It is a smart change of position. Picture a skilled chess player forced to play on a board where someone keeps shaking the table. Pieces slide out of place. Moves become unclear. The whole game falls apart. The smartest player would not try to play faster or shout louder. They would simply stop the game until the board is steady. The same idea applies to conversations. When someone drags you into a setting full of interruptions, sarcasm, or emotional tricks, they are moving the discussion into ground where confusion helps them. Staying there only makes their position stronger. Smart people instead choose settings where clarity matters. They prefer calm discussions, private conversations, or moments where both people can think without pressure. In these conditions, logic gets its power back, emotion fades, reality becomes harder to ignore. Machiavelli once said, "A wise ruler ought never to keep his word when doing so would go against his interests." This idea shows a deeper rule. Strategy requires flexibility. You do not blindly follow expectations when those expectations put you at a disadvantage. Instead, you adjust. You decide when and where engagement will happen, and if the conditions are not good, you simply say no to the invitation. Over time, this behavior changes how others see you. People begin to realize that provoking you in chaotic situations will not create the show they hoped for. You do not argue in public for attention. You do not compete with noise. You stay calm and move discussions to places where thought is possible. And when that change happens, something interesting occurs. The person who depended on confusion suddenly struggles without the cover of chaos. Their arguments get weaker. Their exaggerations become clear. The battlefield has shifted, and now intelligence has the upper hand. One of the most quiet forms of power in any discussion is the ability to control the frame. Most people believe arguments are won by having better points. They focus on gathering facts, preparing replies, and defending their position with stronger explanations. While this method seems logical, it often traps you in a reacting role. You become someone answering attacks instead of guiding where the conversation goes. Foolish individuals depend heavily on this pattern. They throw accusations, exaggerations, or misleading claims into the discussion and force you to respond to them. Each time you answer one point, they move to another. The discussion becomes endless. You are always defending. They are always changing the subject. This is where smart people take a different path. Instead of fighting inside the frame created by the other person, they change the frame completely. A frame is the lens through which a conversation is seen. It decides what the discussion is about, what questions matter, and what standards are used to judge ideas. If someone says you are wrong because everyone disagrees with you, they are creating a frame based on popularity. If you argue inside that frame, you are already accepting their rules. But smart thinkers do something else. They turn the conversation toward principles, proof, or long-term results. For example, instead of arguing about whether many people believe something, they ask a calm question: what proof supports that claim? That simple question shifts the frame from popularity to evidence. Suddenly, the conversation runs under different rules. Emotion becomes less useful. Clarity becomes needed. Another strong method is asking questions that show contradictions. When someone makes an exaggerated statement, the smart response is not to disagree right away. Instead, it is curiosity. How would that work in real life? What result would that bring? These questions encourage the other person to look at their own thinking. Often they start to see gaps in their argument without you directly confronting them. This way is quiet but powerful. Rather than attacking the person, you guide the discussion toward deeper thought. Niccolo Machiavelli understood the importance of perception in shaping influence. He saw that controlling how situations are understood often matters more than controlling the actions themselves. He said, "Men judge generally more by their eyes than by their hands, because everyone can see and few can feel." This observation shows how easily people are swayed by looks and stories. When you control the frame of a conversation, you control the story through which others understand events, and the person who shapes the story quietly shapes the result. This does not need aggression. It does not need endless explanations. It just needs awareness. You see the frame being presented. You notice its weak points. Then you gently guide the discussion towards stronger ground. Over time, this habit changes how conversations happen around you. People notice that talks with you feel different. Instead of becoming chaotic, they become organized. Instead of emotional reactions, they lead toward thoughtful examination. You become someone who quietly directs the flow of dialogue, and that direction carries influence because the person who controls the frame does not need to argue loudly. They simply decide what the conversation is really about. Now I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I control the frame. By now you can probably see the pattern. Smart people do not waste their strength trying to beat foolish individuals in endless arguments. They understand something far more important. The goal is not to win debates. The goal is to keep control. Every pointless argument pulls your attention away from what actually matters. It distracts your mind, drains your energy, and places you inside someone else's emotional battlefield. And the more time you spend there, the less time you spend building something meaningful. This is why the smartest people rarely argue the most. They watch, they think, and when needed, they simply step away. Machiavelli understood that real power often works quietly. It does not depend on shouting louder than others or proving a point in every disagreement. It depends on discipline. The discipline to choose your battles, the discipline to protect your focus, the discipline to stay calm while others lose control. When you use the ideas from this video, something interesting begins to happen. Foolish individuals no longer have power over your attention. Their provocations lose their effect. Their attempts to drag you into conflict simply fail, and without your reaction, their power fades. This does not mean you avoid all confrontation. It means you engage only when the result truly matters. You stop arguing for ego. You start acting with purpose. And that shift changes the whole dynamic of your interactions. If this video made you see arguments differently, take a second to support the channel. Hit the like button, share this video with someone who always gets pulled into pointless debates, and subscribe to the channel if you want more insights on strategy, power, and clear thinking. Because this channel is not about simple motivation. It is about understanding how the mind works, and learning how to use that understanding to move through the world with control. Remember this. You do not need to beat fools in arguments. Most of the time they beat themselves. Your job is simply to stay above the noise and keep moving forward.